Now our job is to discuss the talk that we've just heard, to see what evidence there is to support what Jesus has said. Was he a rogue? Was he a lunatic? Was he a good man, or was he the Son of God?
So what do we make of the talk? How convincing is it? Jesus said Jesus talked as if he was God.
We actually said he was the Son of God.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, like, his words are pretty impressive. I mean, his actual words. Like, it's the Sermon on the Mount. It's here somewhere. It's Matthew 5, 3-6. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just the amazing words he used, it's the sort of teaching itself, isn't it?
It's pretty impressive.
Well, it's more than impressive. I mean, it's become the foundation of our legal system and moral teachings the world over, actually.
Hardly the words of a fraudster, or a rogue, or a lunatic.
We talk about what he said, but what's also impressive is what he actually did.
His works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, like, if what the Bible says is true, it must have been pretty amazing to be around him. I mean, like, for instance, at the wedding reception, changing water into wine was absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, he healed the sick and exorcised demons.
He even brought people back to life from the dead.
And, like, his control over the elements and stuff, like stilling the water and feeding the 5,000 and stuff.
Let's think, what's the evidence for that, though?
Well, some of the miracles are described in more than one gospel by the different writers, and they're not exactly the same, but sort of the detail, isn't it? Yeah. The important parts are the same.
And there are general descriptions of Jesus in other non-Christian writings from historians at the time.
I mean, not just the words, but what comes shining through his teaching is his heart. He loves the waifs and strays, those who are out of society. I mean, if he was trying to influence people, he'd be going for the top brass and so on, but he's not interested in that. He seems to just want to love people and not chase the most influential people.
Yeah, I mean, so you could say, in effect, he does it in the hardest possible way he could have done.
Mm.
Yeah. Like on the cross.
Yeah.
Greater love hath no man than he gave his life for his friends.
I mean, people say, is he a fraud or a lunatic? I don't think so.
No.
One of the things that I think would be hardest to argue with is the way that Jesus fulfilled so many Old Testament prophecies.
I think I read somewhere that something like 300 prophecies written by lots of different people that he that came to fruition, and that's over a period of 500 years of prophecies. And if I remember rightly, something like on one day there were 29 individual prophecies that on the day he died.
Yeah, well, I mean, a con man might be able to arrange some of those, and he'd have to be quite a learned scholar in that case. But there are some that would be completely out of his control, like his birth, the whole story around that, his death, and then how and where he was buried as well.
Yeah, exactly.
What about the resurrection? Isn't that, like, the best evidence that he was the Son of God?
I guess it is. If you believe in it, if you believe in the resurrection.
Why wouldn't you believe it?
Well, there are a number of arguments raised. Usually explanations by the people who doubt it.
You mean, like, do they say that Jesus didn't die?
Yeah, that's one explanation I've heard.
Well, what about, like, all the brutality and the way they crucified him and they tore him? Like, have you seen Passion of the Christ? Yeah. Like, the way they put him on the cross, nail his hands, whipping him, all that, and like being on the cross for 6 hours. I mean, is that not?
And he put the spear in his side.
Yeah, spear in his side as well.
And then, like, it says, I think it's in John somewhere. John, let me see. It talks about the blood. John 19:34. Instead, one of the soldiers pierced Jesus' side with a spear, bringing a sudden flow of blood and water. I'm reliably informed that that's a sign of death. It's a sign of the separation of serum and clot, and it means now that people know that means he was dead.
And then there's also the matter of moving the massive, terrifically heavy stone from the mouth of the tomb.
And the soldiers, I mean, they must have believed Jesus was dead when they, took him down from the cross. They've been deliberately posted to stand guard by the tomb to prevent the disciples stealing his body, because that would have been a worry from the Roman officials. I mean, can you actually see Jesus, who, on the basis of this argument, is not the Son of God but an ordinary chap? Can you actually see him pretending to be dead after all this time and after all that's happened to him, suddenly moving that massive stone and walking away with these proper, Roman guards, who were pretty reputable guards at the time, weren't they? Without any of them noticing? Is that? I think it's impossible.
I agree, exactly.
I mean, that's another argument, isn't it? That the disciples took the body. But surely, that's more, just as unlikely. Because, you've got to get past the guards, sneak past them, move the stone, steal the body, all unnoticed.
Yeah, and at that point in time, the disciples were a terrified, disillusioned rabble. They were all over the place.
Another suggestion is that robbers stole the body, but the same things apply. They'd have had to get past the guards, they'd have had to move the stone, and why would they do it? There's nothing valuable at all in the tomb. Just as ridiculous an explanation.
Then there's the argument maybe the chief priests took the body to stop an uprising, apparently. But then why on earth did they not produce the body when rumours started that Jesus was actually alive? Because it just doesn't make sense. If they'd have produced the body then, that would have solved the problem completely, and probably been the death of Christianity.
I mean, the problem with all these theories is that they're based on the fact that Jesus was just a man. So, I mean, if he hasn't died on the cross, then he'd die in the tomb, and it's all third parties moving him, or he's died later. There's no evidence to suggest that he's died at a later date, or that his body's been found, at least as far as I know.
No.
There's one other point too. If John's Gospel's to be believed, when Peter and John arrived at the tomb, it says how they found the grave clothes there, and they're sort of almost like a chrysalis that he'd stepped out of in the tomb.
Well, what happened afterwards is very important. First of all, think of that frightened rabble, the disciples. There was Peter, who was just feeling so guilty after having betrayed Jesus.
Yeah, and there's Thomas, who doesn't believe anything he's told unless he's seen himself.
I mean, why else would they believe he was alive unless they'd seen him?
Could they have imagined it, or maybe hallucinated?
Well, I mean, hallucinations usually sort of people are sick or on drugs, but the point is here, all these different people, are they likely to have all had the same hallucination, the same sort of imagination, and seeing the same thing at about the same time?
Come on, they were transformed. I mean, in their lives, they just went out and travelled all around and suffered whatever befell them. I mean, their conviction that Jesus was alive was completely unshakable.
And in their deaths. I found this on the internet, this information about the deaths of the apostles. Matthew suffered martyrdom in Ethiopia, killed by a sword wound. Mark died in Alexandria, Egypt, dragged by horses through the streets until he was dead. Luke hanged in Greece. John was boiled in a huge basin of boiling oil in Rome. Peter crucified upside down on an X-shaped cross. And Thomas was speared and died on one of his missionary trips. It's all there.
Is that not in the Bible, though, is it?
Well, no, except about James and Peter.
Oh.
There's historical evidence and tradition from Hippolytus of Rome and Eusebius, but I mean, all that there is agrees there's no contrary evidence to show that the disciples are anything different from what we've been told.
Who in the right mind would go through all that? Okay, they agree stories, they agree what they've seen. They're not going to go through all those things and lose the home, leave the family, suffer death like that all about something they've made up, are they? And anyway, apart from the disciples, we're told that there are lots of other people who actually witnessed Jesus being alive.
Yeah.
During the 40 days before he ascended to heaven.
Yeah. There were the two guys on the road to Emmaus.
Well, there were more than that. There's something in the Bible. I think it's one.
Corinthians.
Yeah.
I think it's 1 Corinthians 15.
Yeah.
Just bear with me.
Yeah. What does that say?
1 Corinthians 15 verses 3 to 7. For what I received I passed on to you as of first importance, that Christ died for our sins according to the Scriptures, that he was buried, that he was raised on the third day according to the Scriptures, and that he appeared to Peter and then to the 12. After that he appeared to more than 500 of the brothers at the same time, most of whom are still living, though some have fallen asleep. Then he appeared to James, then to all the apostles, and last of all he appeared to me also, as to one abnormally born.
Yeah. Sort of Paul there at the end. It's unlikely, isn't it, that all those 500 people who were scattered all over the place had the same hallucination, believed the same thing.
And he rose bodily. He wasn't like a ghost, was he?
No.
But is there any other evidence?
Well, I would say just the fact that we're talking about it today. I mean, we're what, some 2,000 years or so on from when these events happened.
Yeah, I mean, it started with, as we've said, with the disciples spreading the good news. And you've got to acknowledge that these people weren't, you know, high society, weren't the creme de la creme of society at the time. I mean, they were pretty, as Matt said before, it was a bit of a rabble, weren't they? And Christianity grew from that. Well, it exploded really, didn't it? And, you know, from all that, now it's about a third of the world's population are Christians.
Yeah, that's people of every race, nationality, colour, rich and poor. It's amazing.